Hello, and welcome to Slooh. If you've ever gazed up at the night sky and thought, I wonder what's up there, then you've come to the right place, because together we peer into the deepest, darkest reaches of space every night here at Slooh. I'm your ghoul for the night, Paul Cox, a long-time Slooh member and space enthusiast, and tonight I'm with astronomer extraordinaire, Paige Godfrey. Happy Halloween, Paige. What are we going to get up to tonight?
Happy Halloween, Paul.
Yeah, sorry, I had to do something special, didn't I?
I'm jealous. I don't have one of them.
Well, I'm going to take the hoodie off because it's really hot here now. I can probably rub this stuff off the face. No, the face paint will not rub off, so you're stuck with it, Paige. Some people would argue that this is a better look for me, but I'm suitably in character here. We've got proper live candles here. I'm sitting in a big ingle nook fireplace here in the UK with my ghoulish face paint on. But what are we doing tonight, Paige?
Tonight we have a special show. We're going to be looking live through our telescopes at nebulae, stars, and constellations, but not just any of these objects, ones that have some awesome, spectacular names. And then later in the show, Helen Avery, who I think my yellow bar has her name on.
Oh.
Hey, everybody, not Helen, but she'll be back. She'll be on later in the show, and she's going to talk about some of like the lore and the mythology and a little bit of the psychology behind why humans seem to love monsters so much and how we can find these objects even in space. So if viewers want to ask us any questions during the show, there's a thread in the Slooh discussions board. And I know we already have a couple questions, so we'll get to those. But Paul, what have we got lined up in the telescopes tonight?
Ooh, well, I love that word you use. Spooktacular, was it?
It was.
That's very good. You need to submit that to the Oxford English Dictionary. You know, they adopt a new word every year or whatever. But what have we got tonight? Well, look, here we are looking at the Canary Islands Observatory. It looks like daylight there, Paige, but it's not. We are under moonlight. So it's just past quarter moon at the moment. And what you can see, all those white buildings there, those are the enormous telescopes. And one of those are the Slooh telescopes. That you can't take me seriously like this, can you? One of those is the Slooh telescopes, and they're going to be providing all of our feeds tonight. So as we go through the night, we'll talk about all of them. We've got all sorts of kind of spooky and mysterious objects scheduled in the telescopes. We've got monster stars. We've got galaxies that devour other galaxies. We've got the remnants of some of the most colossal explosions in the universe, and a whole variety of other kind of spooky and creepy objects in the darkest reaches of the night sky. But we've got great conditions tonight, and we are also going to be getting a live feed from the Chile Observatory, which is back online tonight as well. So that's going to be pretty cool.
That's exciting. You have a challenge set for our members that are watching on the telescopes tonight, don't you?
I did, yes. Now, this was specifically an object that we wanted to show live in the telescopes, but it's so big, Paige, this nebula, that it doesn't fit within a single image. So I set members a challenge to do what's called a mosaic. And this was, we set up lots of different missions of this large object, and I challenged members to create a finished mosaic image, and we've got it here. It is the Witch Head Nebulae, and I think it was David Mahalik. Yes, David was the guy who put this thing together. Studio will put it up in a sec. I know they're having problems over there. So look at that. And a single image page, we wouldn't see all of that. Now, can you see in that image the witch's head?
Yep.
Yep. So
definitely.
for people who can't quite see it in that image, the kind of very top darkest patch to the left is the kind of eyeball. Then you've got the pointy nose coming out. Then you've got her gaping mouth. And then at the bottom, this enormous, horrible, pointy chin. And I reckon this is the best Halloween spooky object in the night sky. And David Malik shared that in the discussion boards with everybody. So if you want to see the full resolution image of that, hop over to the discussion boards because it looks fabulous.
I'm gonna have to take my own mosaic of that. That's
Mm,
incredible. And so it's called the Witch Head Nebula. But for
yes.
viewers who may not know what a nebula is, we should define it and we should talk about some of the different kinds of nebula because there's not just one nebula, there's lots of nebula. And so the plural, maybe if you hear us saying it, is called nebulae. Um, that's not made up, it's real. But a nebula is a cloud of dust and gas like hydrogen and helium and some plasma, some other ionized gases that's interstellar. So that means that it's out in between the stars and it emits light of various colors in the optical, which is what we can see with our eyes. So the most common source that starts a nebula is when there's high energy photons or light, basically radiation from a nearby star. So if there's a star nearby, this cloud of gas and dust, and if that star is big enough and hot enough, it'll excite the cloud of gas and dust, and that cloud will shine light that we can see that's all these pretty colors, and then we call it a nebula.
Hey,
And you know
Paige.
what I learned in this week was that a nebula originally was named for any diffuse astronomical object back in like in the origins of astronomy before they really knew exactly what it was, including galaxies. They called them nebulae.
I'm just asking the studio to hop over to our live missions because we have got a whole stack of examples. And that one that you were just describing there, that sounded like an emission nebulae where the
Mhm.
the the molecules in that dust and gas cloud get excited and they actually emit their own light because they become ionized. But there's a couple of
Yeah.
other types that we're going to see tonight, and one of them's
Mhm.
called a reflection nebulae, isn't it? And that's
Yes.
not emitting its own light. So what's that one
Correct.
doing, Paige?
So if the star that's nearby the cloud, the nebula, is not hot enough, it won't actually excite the nebula's own gas and dust, but the cloud can reflect the light from other stars. And so that star that's near it, or a bunch of stars, doesn't have to be just one star, but it'll reflect the light from the other stars. And so instead of seeing the emission light from the nebula itself, you're seeing the reflection of starlight that's near the cloud of gas and dust.
Okay, and this one actually is a galaxy. This particular galaxy that we're looking at here, this is using the half-meter telescope, Slooh's biggest telescope. And that is this really peculiar galaxy, Cetus A. Now, I know Helen Avery later on wanted to
Mhm.
talk about this strange constellation of Cetus. And this is kind of a good Halloweenish, spooky galaxy to look at, Paige, because right at the heart of that galaxy, we believe there's a supermassive black hole,
Ooh.
big enough to be devouring and ripping stars apart. I mean, what kind of is a black hole? You know, we kind of see them drawn, and whenever I see them, they're kind of drawn as a disk and it's just a hole in it. But I always think, well, they must be taking stuff in from all sides. So is it a sphere? What is Earth is a black hole?
So, uh, they're so complicated and they're really, really difficult to understand what they are. Astronomers barely know because, of course, we can't see what's inside a black hole. But the disk that you see in the artist representations are because when things spin in space, they do flatten out to a disk. So, if we have like rings around a planet, for example, they're in a disk because of the way they flatten as they rotate. So, the black hole is spinning, and as it spins it's taking in, or we call it accreting, all of this
Mm.
matter around it, whether it's gas, dust, stars that are ripping apart, and it pulls them in to this halo disk around the black hole before they get sucked over the event horizon and are gone forever. And these supermassive black holes are actually more popular than we thought that they were. So a lot of galaxies, apparently, we think have a black hole at the center of the galaxy, and supermassive black holes, they're monsters. It's an
And
appropriate title for tonight.
you wouldn't want to be close to one of those things, would you?
No,
Because
you'd
what
be
there's a
spaghettified.
term exactly. That's a
Yeah.
lovely term that people use. You would
Yes.
be spaghettified because you'd just be pulled, but the kind of bit closest to you would be pulled faster than the bit further away from the black hole. So you'd basically be strung out like a string of spaghetti. Now, Paige, have a look at this. Now, this one on our screen is another type of nebulae, which we haven't mentioned. That looks suspiciously like a planetary nebulae to me. So that thing on the left of the screen, it kind of looks like 3 stars, but it's within this kind of region of kind of bluish material, a circle. And one of those stars is right in the center of that. And that's a planetary nebula, isn't it?
Right. Yes. So a planetary nebula, you might relate them to supernova remnants. They are different, but a planetary nebula, when a star, and actually a star like our sun, because it's not going to be massive enough to form a supernova, at the end of its life, it will puff up. It'll become what we call a red giant, and it'll start to shed this shell of gas off of it out into space. And that's what a planetary nebula is. So it's not actually, it's a tricky term, a lot of jargon because it's not planets and it has nothing to do with planets. So I hate that it's called a planetary nebula, but because it took me a really long time to understand what it was. But it is the like excess gas that's being blown off of the red giant when the star is dying.
You can blame my local hero for that. I live very close to the city of Bath, where William Herschel discovered Uranus. And he came up with the term, I believe. If viewers know better, then please post in the discussion boards. Don't forget, we're going to answer your questions there as well. Now, this is the next mission page coming up in the Slooh 17-inch telescope. So this is our Canary 2 wide field telescope. Now, this one is a little bit more difficult to see, but the reason why I've included this one is because it's a jellyfish nebula. And we've got, this is really faint. Now, it will look a little bit clearer when this one comes into color, but the studio might be able to bring up an image there. Oh, look, the studio are hot tonight. Look at that.
Wow.
This is from Peter Eilis. Now, he posted this in the call for, images for tonight's show, and this is that very object. And what Peter's done, Peter has sprinkled his magic image processing dust over the top of it, and there we can see this jellyfish nebulae. And it's so obvious why it's called that. There's its body at the top, and you even see its legs kind of dangling, its tentacles dangling down. So I thought that was a really suitable object for us to be looking at tonight.
And if you're looking on our website, also at the telescopes, or whenever we flip back to it, you can see on the left side of the image those 3 bright stars. Now you can see them in the live feed. Those are those 3 bright stars where the jellyfish nebula would be, that would be the start of it.
Yeah. And don't forget, everybody, all of the telescope feeds tonight, you need to be watching this at slooh.com in the situation room, in the space situation room, because you'll see Paige and I in the video box, but underneath you'll see all these little tabs, and all the little tabs are for all of the different telescope feeds that we're using tonight. And you can flick on any one of those and you can hit the camera button and you can snap your very own collection of Halloween. What did you call it, Paige? Spookified, or what was your term? Spooktastic. Oh, spooktacular. Okay. Yeah, you can have your own spooktacular collection of scary images. Now, we've got a whole stack of other objects lined up, Paige. Let's have a look. What have we got in... we've got... I'm just going to have a quick look, see what we've got in.
But you can see the color coming in now.
Oh, it is. Oh, yeah. So we better not go from this. So, yeah, there it is. That lovely kind of body of the jellyfish going all the way over the edge. Now, we've got some color gradient in this. You can see this kind of strange color hue, Page, coming over the image. That's because we're battling a moon tonight, and it's moonlight increases the noise when you're trying to image these really, really faint objects like this. But let's take a look at some of the other telescope feeds, and then we can probably move on and maybe talk about some other object types that we've lined up tonight. So, studio, what can you line up for us? Oh, look at that. Right, that is the deep sky, and that is... Oh, don't say this one 3 times. That should give viewers a good clue for this one. Betelgeuse, Betelgeuse, Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse, Betelgeuse, Betelgeuse. You can say it however you want, but that is what we're looking at, Paige. This is a supermassive star, isn't it? It's one of the brightest stars in Orion, and that's what we're looking at here.
It's a red supergiant, and
Okay.
it's called the eventual supernova. It's the one of the well, so like you said, it's one of the brightest stars in Orion, but it's also the ninth brightest star in the night sky.
Mm.
And it's going to go supernova one day. So I mentioned that our sun isn't large enough to do that, but Betelgeuse is much larger than our sun. And so when it dies, it will blow up in a supernova. And you will be able to see that on Earth from the ground. I mean, except it might not happen in our lifetime, but you know.
It would be rather spectacular because, we haven't had, I don't think there's been a good supernova in the Milky Way galaxy, our own galaxy, for quite a number of years. And
Yeah.
we are going to see an object a little bit later, it's actually the remnants of a star just
Mhm.
like Betelgeuse. And
Mhm.
it's the Crab Nebula, and that's a supernova remnant. And Chinese astronomers actually witnessed that happen. It was back in the 1000 and something, 1060 or something. It was a long time ago, but they actually saw that particular star go supernova. So they could even see it during the daylight. It was so bright. And then
Mhm.
what we're going to see a little bit later on in the show is the live streams coming in of the Crab Nebula, and that's a supernova remnant, and it's going at incredible speeds. Basically, the star has self-destructed and it's been blown apart, and in that explosion it's made all of the matter that makes up, if you look around the room and even at yourself, that all of the matter in there
Yeah.
was made in a supernova explosion. Hey, look at this one, Paige.
We are
This is one
starstruck.
of my favorite objects for the
The
half
Running
meter telescope,
Man.
the Running Man Nebula. Now, what is he running to? I guess if you
Or
were
from.
in a romantic, exactly, you could be in a romantic mood saying he's running to his lover, maybe, or he could be running away from maybe the Flame Nebula, because that's really quite close, or the Horsehead Nebula, which we're also going to see a little bit later, because they're all part of this enormous complex of nebulosity in the constellation of Orion. But this is one of my favorites. When this pops into color, it absolutely stunning. Now, this one is a reflection nebula, if I'm not mistaken, Paige. So all of that gas and dust we're seeing is a reflection of the light from those stars, I
Mm-hmm.
think. But there's also an element of dark nebulae in there as well, which
Mm.
is at the bottom. You can see there's a kind of dark patch,
Yep.
which is darker than the background sky. And that's exactly what the Horsehead Nebula is, which is what we're going to see later. So the Horsehead shape itself, we'll see quite distinctly. That is a dark nebula, but actually all around it are emission and reflection nebulae. So we're really seeing just a silhouette of this dark dust cloud, which is the horse's head, against all of these other bright and colourful types of nebulae. But we'll stick with this one until this pops into colour, because we have got really, really nice conditions at the observatory tonight. What
Why
else are you looking
would
forward to
a
tonight?
why would a nebula be dark? Can you tell us?
Well, when we see a dark nebulae, what we're really seeing is we're just seeing anything behind it being blocked out. So
Oh,
one of the
okay.
most famous ones, like the Horsehead, but a larger one, a larger
Mhm.
example, is the Snake Nebulae. Now, if ever there was a nebula to see for Halloween, it would be the Snake Nebulae. But unfortunately, it's not visible at this time of year. But that one, Paige, is this huge cloud of really dense dust and gas, and it forms this enormous S shape. I mean, it is straight out of Hogwarts, straight out of Slithering, because it just looks like this enormous snake. And all it is this dark patch of dust and gas, which is blocking out any of the light from stars or anything else behind it. And that's what makes a dark nebulae.
I think that might be my favorite, the dark nebulae.
I
I
know,
think
and there are some
that's the
good ones. And
coolest.
they are quite difficult to observe, but the half-meter telescope and the Canary 2 17-inch telescopes are superb for that kind of object, because they can draw out all the faint light that's in the surrounding nebulosity or star field for those, because a lot of those dark nebulae actually are against a really dense, dark star field. So it really kind of pops out. Now, what's this one? That looks like, Paige, a globular cluster to me. This is a Canary 2, so that is going to be
The
the
ghost
Ghost
goblet.
Goblet. Now, I had not heard of this one until Keith Smith, a member, I asked for suggestions for spooky objects for tonight, and Keith came up with this one. I had never heard of it. Now, I set up a mission to it last night just to make sure that actually it was worthwhile seeing. And it's a beautiful, beautiful little cluster.
Hmm.
Are these stars associated, or do they just happen to all be in the same place, Paige?
Actually, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, a cluster itself would be that the stars are gravitationally bound. So if we're calling it a cluster of stars, then that means that they're gravitationally bound. And when you see them so populated like this, that's likely what's happening.
Yeah,
Particularly, I'm not familiar with this cluster, so
I'm just having a look actually, because it doesn't look like a classic globular cluster, because we normally see a globular cluster and they normally are quite spherical. The stars are so tightly
yeah.
packed that you see them as a kind of spherical shape, and you can actually resolve all of the stars in it. But this is kind of it's quite dense, but maybe somebody can help us out in the
In the
discussion
discussion
boards
board.
and just confirm for
Right.
us. I
Hmm.
will just look it up actually, Paige. So there is another kind of cluster, which is that globular cluster. Those are really, really old stars, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
They're
here we
really
go.
old stars and they. Mhm.
Right, it is an open cluster. So
Yeah.
this is a group of stars that formed actually in one of the nebulae that we've been talking about. So a really dense cloud of dust and gas. And all of that kind of collapses in on itself. And that's where stars are born. The Orion Nebula, that you might see a little bit later, that's where loads of stars are being born at the very heart of that. So what an open cluster of stars is usually a group of stars that were all born out of the same cloud. Now, the Seven Sisters are probably the most common example of that.
Yeah.
That's an open cluster. They're quite large. You've got the Hyades as well. But the Seven Sisters, that's within, when you see an image of the Seven Sisters in the Canary Islands telescopes,
Hmm.
you'll see that there's all this background nebulosity. And people think, when they see it, they think that those stars came from that dust cloud. But actually, it's just a coincidence that those Seven Sisters, those bright, hot stars, just happened to be passing through another interstellar dust cloud because they were so hot and so bright that they blew off all of the remains of the dust cloud that they were
Right.
born in, which I think is really quite cool. But anyway, so this one is an open cluster of stars. Our database is saying it's got 122 members. 3.1 billion years old. Whoa, look at
Oh
that
my
page.
gosh.
What do you
Easily
make of
distracted we
that?
are.
Oh, well done, Laura, in the studio in Connecticut. You timed that one perfectly. There he is, the running man. I think I'll go with the romantic rather than the nasty version. I think he's running towards his lover rather than running away from a Cetus monster or something like
Well, in spirit of Halloween, I'm gonna go with the violent
that.
one.
Okay, where was your face paint? If you wanted to get into the Halloween
Oh,
spirit, where was your face paint, Paige? Come on.
well, I don't have a face paint, but today I dressed up as Mars.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, he's sweet. So that's that. So this is the life of a professional astronomer, right?
You should see actually what I've got on the shelves on my desk. I have Mars, I have the Mars rover Barbie.
But this is the thing that a lot of us and a lot of Slooh members, we have been space fanatics since we were kids.
Yeah.
And you probably haven't heard, but we once sent men to the moon on what was called the Apollo missions. So
Oh,
you
that's
weren't
right.
born
I didn't
then,
hear
you
about
probably
that.
haven't
That
heard
was
about it, but
before my
it
time,
did
wasn't
happen.
it?
So in my lifetime, I was old enough, I am old enough to actually remember that. But it's all of those childhood memories, isn't it? And you just, as a kid, you just soak up everything to do with space and astronomy or whatever your interest is. But I have to admit, I did not have an astronaut Barbie.
I'm pretty proud that I haven't taken her out of the box.
Oh, you're one of those, are you? Okay. You're one of those kids who buy these great, great toys, but you leave them in the box because you know it's going to devalue them. Shame on you, Godfrey.
Oh.
Shame on you. Anyway, come on, let's have a look. Let's have a look. Oh, look at this one. Go on, Paige. I'll let you take this one away. What are
The
we looking
Horsehead
at there?
Nebula.
I
It's
know,
still
isn't it
coming
beautiful?
into
Now,
view.
now, folks, you have to put your head on one side for this one. So if you kind of look at it with your head pointed to the left, to the right, you'll see, and in color, when this pops into color, it will really hop out. So, Paige, we're seeing some nebulosity behind where the horse head is, and that's
Right.
just nebulosity, that's reflection nebulae, I believe, in this particular case. So there
Hmm.
are some young bright stars there. We can see one of the young bright stars in this very image. So that's in these dust clouds, that they're very large stars, aren't they? And they're huge. And that means that they only have a lifespan of maybe a few million years. Isn't that right?
Right. Yeah, larger stars die much faster than smaller stars. Much faster. They have so much energy that they fuse all of the gases in their core so fast and they just literally blow through their gas. And those are the ones that go supernova.
Whoa.
They
And
die very violent deaths.
there's another bright star fairly close to this, which is
Mhm.
Altonac, I think, and that's the leftmost star in Orion's belt, and that's we see that in Slooh images. In fact, we may have one of those missions scheduled for later for the Flame Nebula, which is incredibly close to the Horsehead Nebula. People don't realize just how close all these nebulae are. But Dave Larkin, another long-time Slooh member, he's kind of our mosaic guru. Remember, we showed you that terrific
Mhm.
mosaic of the Witch Head Nebula at the beginning of the show. And Dave put together a huge mosaic of a lot of this Orion complex. So the Horsehead Nebula was there, the Flame Nebula was in the same image, and all of these other bright bits of nebulae were there. But this is great when it goes to color because you just see that silhouette of the Horsehead pop out even more. And Hubble page has taken some really close-up shots of the Horsehead Nebula, and it destroys the illusion, but it kind of adds to it because you see all these tiny, tenuous dust
Mhm.
clouds. You've seen them, I guess.
Can you see nebulae from the ground, like without telescopes, like with your
Yeah,
bare eye? Because we keep talking about all this colored light and that these
yeah,
look better when they come into color. But if we can see the color, then we should be able to see them with our eyes.
yeah. You won't see really color in very many objects through a
Right.
telescope, beyond planets and stuff. Most of these
Right.
objects that we're looking at are really faint and fuzzy, but we're talking about Orion, and the Orion Nebulae is
Hmm.
really, really easy. I don't know if we've got our all sky camera available, but if the studio can call that up, we must come back to the Horsehead and see that in color. But there's the all sky camera. So there we can see Orion. So the bright object to the right, that's the moon. Hopefully that'll disappear, so it'll stop making the images noisy. But you can just see coming up, rising up in the east, is
Hmm.
the constellation of Orion. And we can see very clearly it's three stars making up his
Yes.
belt. But just below that, making up what's called Orion's sword, there are some stars in there, but
Hmm.
actually the main part of the brightness that we're seeing there is the very core of the Orion Nebulae.
Hmm.
So there you go. We can see quite clearly, you know, one of these nebulae with our naked eyes, because if you go outside, you'll see it even better than we can see it here in the all sky. Even better when the moon's not around. The
And if you're
furthest
looking
object,
at Orion in the top left corner above the belt, that red looking star, that's Betelgeuse right there.
exactly, don't say it three times, otherwise he's going to turn up and you won't
You
like
said
it
it
when he turns
already.
up. Um, There is one other object that I know of, Paige, which is one of the most distant objects that you can see with your naked eye. In fact, there are two. A lot of people will turn around, and a lot of amateur astronomers, if you ask them, they turn around and say, yeah, the Andromeda Galaxy. And you can see the Andromeda Galaxy really quite easily, especially at this time of year as well. But under a dark sky, it has to have no moonlight, no light pollution or anything like that. And you can see it as a faint fuzzy patch. See it in binoculars, you can see it even better as a faint fuzzy patch. You can kind of see it's got some length on it. But that if you go to a true dark site like the Canary Islands Observatory, 8,000 feet up on a volcano, no light pollution, smooth, calm air coming over the Atlantic, you can see one of our other targets for tonight, which is the Triangulum galaxy. Now, you only see it as a really faint fuzzy patch, but that is the furthest object that you can see with your naked eye. Because the Triangulum galaxy, everything that we're seeing so far tonight, other than the galaxies, all of the nebulae,
Mhm.
they're in our own Milky Way galaxy, aren't they?
Right. Right. Yeah, that's something that's really interesting. When people find out that they like all the stars you see in our night sky, they're all in our galaxy. We
Yeah,
don't see individual stars in other galaxies, barely even with telescopes, let alone with your eye. So everything that you see, if it's a star, is in our galaxy. I think that's really cool, actually. Like that, I don't think
it
that's
is.
limiting. I think that's amazing.
Well, you know me. I love my old astronomy books, and it's only been a little over 100 years that they saw through their big telescopes, their lovely new
Mhm.
telescopes. They saw things like the Andromeda galaxy, but at that
Right.
time it was called the Andromeda Nebulae. Oh, look
Right.
at that! The timing tonight is perfect. This is the live image stream coming in from the Canary 2 17-inch telescope. This is a telescope to remind new viewers out there that Slooh members get to control every night. This is one of my favorite objects in this telescope, and it's the Triangulum galaxy. And we see this so clearly. We've got to stay on this until it goes to color, because unlike so many other galaxies that we can see through the telescopes, we can see this so clearly, Paige, that we'll even see areas of nebulosity in its spiral arms. So we're going to see that you can see there's a very bright kind of globule just at the top left of it,
Uh-huh.
around the 10 o'clock position. When that comes into color, that's going to turn purple because it's a cloud of dust and gas, just like the Orion Nebula that we've got in our galaxy. So maybe there's somebody out there now on a little planet, on a show, looking through some telescopes with a worldwide community at our galaxy. I wonder what they call our galaxy. And they're looking at that purple patch and saying, that's just like our, their Orion Nebula is just like ours. What do you reckon they call it, Paige? Oh, they must have some really cool names for that. You know, these objects, these nebulae in the Triangulum galaxy
Hmm.
have their own catalogue numbers. They are so distinct that we've actually put them in one of the biggest astronomical catalogues called the New General Catalogue. And they're actually designated with NGC numbers. But anyway, we'll watch that as it comes into view. Now, Paige, I hinted to you when we started off the show why I wanted to show this Triangulum galaxy and the Andromeda galaxy on a Halloween show. You might ask kind of, okay, what's so spooky about that? But you know the answer, don't you?
I do know the answer.
Tell the
So it's
viewers,
called
Paige.
cannibalism,
Oh,
galactic cannibalism.
oh, that's not nice.
No, it's not, but it's very appropriate for the holiday. So or you could also call it galactic mergers. So we're on a collision course with Andromeda, and not again, not in our lifetimes. This isn't going to happen tomorrow, but one day the
Oh,
Milky Way
look at
and
that.
Andromeda are going to collide, and they're going to merge, and they're going to eat each other, and they're going to become one galaxy. And so when we see galaxies like this, like the Triangulum with the beautiful spiral arms, if we see galaxies that have a really weird shape, they don't have spiral arms, they're not like elliptical, they're just super odd, they were probably formed from galaxy mergers. So our
Yeah.
Milky Way is a spiral galaxy, and after it collides with Andromeda, it will no longer be a spiral galaxy, it will be a mess.
So we've got the Milky Way, we've got the Andromeda galaxy, and we've got the Triangulum galaxy. Now, those are just three galaxies in our particular local group
Mhm.
of galaxies. But did you know that the Triangulum galaxy, we think, and we're a little less certain about this, but we believe that Triangulum galaxy is going to be part of that merger between the Milky
Oh,
Way
yes,
galaxy, our
yes.
own galaxy, and Andromeda. So it's going to be
Yep.
three galaxies, three enormous galaxies merging in, let me look at my watch, 4.5 billion years' time, I think it is. So we got some time, but hey, listen, look at that. And you can see that great big clump of dust. So all of the stars, all of the what look like pinpoints of stars in that image are in our own galaxy. What we're seeing behind those stars is this other galaxy beyond it. But those little purple regions that we're seeing are actually enormous clouds of dust and gas in its spiral arms. And right now, as we're seeing that, there are newborn stars being made there. In fact, it will have happened quite a long time ago, because Paige, it takes quite a long time, doesn't it? We're kind of looking at this as if it was millions of years ago. We're not seeing it kind of like tonight,
Right.
the light.
Right.
Well, how does that work then?
Oh, so this is what we mean when we say things are at a distance of X amount of light years. So light years is a distance. It's how
Okay,
long it takes something to travel in, well, how long it takes light to travel in a year. So when something is 1 light year away, it means that in its light will take 1 year to get to us based on
right.
like where it is. And so the more light years away you are, the longer it's going to take the light to get to you, because light travels at a finite speed. And so we
Yeah,
know that speed. And so when we're looking at something that's millions of light years away, it's taken millions of years for that light to get to us. So
yeah.
you're
So
looking at it as it was
yeah.
millions of years ago.
Yeah. So even when we're looking at the live stream of the sun through the Slooh solar telescope every day, we're actually
Mm-hmm.
seeing the sun as it was, isn't it 8 minutes ago? Does it
Yep.
take the light
Yep.
8 minutes, those little photons? But this one, the Triangulum galaxy, that is 3 million light years away. So the light left that 3 million years ago, and it
Mm.
went through the Slooh telescope. It hit this lovely sensitive camera that we've got at the back of it, and it does lots of magic in there before it's spread out to us on the internet. Hey, look at this page. This is one of the things that we were talking about earlier. Viewers, can you guess what it is yet? It's a supernova remnant. It looks like a nebula, doesn't it? But it's actually a supernova remnant. A lot of people get that
Mhm.
confused, Paige. Can you clear up that confusion for us?
Right. So the planetary nebula that I said earlier, you might think of when you think of a supernova remnant, the thing is the way the star dies. So if it's a star that's like the size of our sun or smaller, it's going to puff up into this red giant. It's going to accelerate the shell of gas around it, and you're going to see a planetary nebula. When a star much bigger than that, like Betelgeuse, explodes in a crazy explosion called a supernova, then the gas from the supernova also puffs out into space, but it's called a supernova remnant. It's like a, a circular shell almost around the core of the dead star. And there's like knots of gas in it that are denser than others. And so it's diffuse in the way that it's kind of like a nebula, but it's not a planetary nebula because the way it was created is different, and it's
Okay.
much hotter and traveling much faster.
And that one that
In
we were
a,
just seeing there, the Crab Nebula, that's the one that the Chinese astronomers witnessed 1,000 years ago, amazingly. But since people have been, I don't know if you've ever seen this page, and maybe we'll try and get a community post about it. We've been imaging the Crab Nebulae, the remnants of that star, for decades now with really sensitive cameras. And we've now been imaging it for so long that you can turn it into a time lapse and you can actually see that. So what we're looking at there, the colored area, this is that star, the remnants of that star just being blown out into space. I used to know off the top of my head exactly how fast that was traveling, but I'm old now, so I can't remember. But it's going really, really fast. And that is, you can see it in this animation over the last 30 or 40 years. You can see the structure of it changing. You can see these shock waves as well, Paige, rustling through all of that nebulosity outside it. But we've also got a little bit later some other supernova remnants which look nothing like this whatsoever. And it's because that supernova was a lot closer to us. So the remnants of those, and they're older as well, the remnants of those are spread out over more of the sky. And
Mhm.
two of them kind of have a Halloweeny kind of feel to them because they're the Veil nebulae. So you've got the Veil East and the Veil West nebulae, and they look absolutely cracking in the telescopes as well. This beautiful, the colouring of that page is stunning. It's these purples and pinks and these tenuous strands. And to think that it was this colossal star that ended in such a violent cataclysmic explosion and is now spreading all that good stuff around, all the heavy elements that we're made of. I think that's
Right.
really good.
So,
What else
why
we got?
don't we take a question from the
Ooh,
discussion boards and then I think it'll be time to call in Helen Avery.
indeed.
All right. So, the question is for you, Paul.
Oh, is it?
It says, as I understand, Halloween is a festival of ancient Celtic pagan religion celebrating end of harvest, the new year, spirits, and the dead. In the US, it is mostly for kids, candy, and costumes. How is it celebrated in the UK today?
Okay, so basically the question is kind of saying we had this really cool thing over here in England, and you guys in the States just commercialized the hell out of it, basically. Um,
Wow.
well, what's strange, and I think especially for my age group, actually even my daughter's age group, we haven't really in the UK celebrated Halloween or even acknowledged it, barely. Certainly not in the way that you do in the States. You know, until about 20 years ago. And it started coming out. And I joked to you before the show that 20 years ago, kind of you'd see a pumpkin on sale at a garden centre and people in the UK would buy it, but they didn't know what to do with it. So they knew they kind of put them out for Halloween and they just put them out. They didn't kind of empty them out or carve them into beautiful lanterns or anything like that. But now we have, and I'm going to sound a bit like the Grinch here, but yeah, kids come around, they knock on my door and they ask me for stuff, Paige, and it's just not good enough. But to go back to the question, I am just down the road from Stonehenge, and
Oh.
certainly there has been a, a reinvigoration, I think, of some of those pagan traditions. And Helen's the one to talk about. Actually, we'll ask her because she is a Brit.
Okay.
But really, it's that there are communities now who are bringing back a lot of the celebrations and a lot of those pagan rituals as well. So watch out, children. You could be on the end of a witch's stick.
Oh.
Ha! You will if you come around to my house asking me for sweets.
Oh,
Anyway.
okay. And on that note, we're going to take a quick, like 30-second break. When we come back, Helen Avery will join the conversation with some of the human mythology and the lore behind these space monsters. Don't forget to write a post about your favorite space monster and the community perspectives, and we'll see you in a few.
Bye.
So weird.
You caught Laura, you caught the studio off guard.
Slooh, your interface to outer space. We monitor and broadcast exciting developments from the Space Situation Room so you can witness the most amazing celestial moments with expert guests sharing their visions of the sky. Let us take you to worlds beyond our own.
Give the gift of the universe. Give the gift of Slooh. A celebration of every magical moment in the night sky. For just $60, you can give the budding space explorer in your life the gift of a full year of Slooh membership. It's available now at slooh.com.
And welcome back to Slooh's Monsters Lounge tonight, where we're wondering about what's up there, the spooky nature of some space objects. And Paige is here to join me. Paige, we're looking at another bright star now. I reckon this is probably Betelgeuse again, but we're going to be welcoming to the show
It is not.
Helen Avery. She's going to be coming. Oh, what is it then? Go on, tell me. Is this the Flaming Star Nebulae? Algol. Oh, now you know some stuff about Algol, don't you? Because it's the demon star.
It is the
called
demon star.
star?
Yeah. So it's one of the brightest eclipsing variable stars in our sky.
Ooh, loads of words
so
there.
I'll,
Explain each one of those, Paige. An
yeah.
eclipsing,
Okay.
an eclipsing binary.
And so a variable star is a star whose brightness varies. And eclipsing means that something is traveling in front of it. So you can actually see in our night sky, you can see it through the Slooh telescope beautifully. But also, even with the naked eye sometimes, or a small backyard telescope, you can see it if you know where to look and you have dark skies. And you can see it wink which is when it's eclipsed by another star. If you remember the solar eclipse, it's the same thing. Like the light is being blocked by something else. And so the binary system, like the star travels in front of it. And so you can actually see the eclipse happen in, it's like 9 hours and 40 minutes or something from start to finish, the entire
Wow,
eclipse. So you can
I
watch it.
didn't know that. So is that something that we can do with the Slooh telescopes page?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. If you know when it's happening, the eclipse happens at intervals of like 70 hours or something, like based on the orbit, but then it'll take like 10 hours to eclipse the star. So if you know when it's going to eclipse, then you can set up the Slooh telescope for missions throughout those 10 hours and take like a time lapse of it, really.
Paige, you should post about that
I
in the
should post
Slooh
about it.
discussion boards, because that
I
I
will.
know is something members will love to
I
try and
will.
do. And it's a
Yes.
great thing to collaborate on, because if you have to observe it over a period of time, everybody can set up their own missions for it and then come together and put all of their data together. So that would be a really cool
Yeah,
joint project to do. So now we
absolutely.
are waiting
Yes.
for Helen to come in,
Yeah.
and I'm just going to take a quick look to see what else we've got coming up on the telescopes. Oh, hold on one second, just getting a message. Okay, how should I go about the transition? Right, the studio is worried. How are they going to transition, Paige, between me leaving you off the screen, viewers, I know you won't want me to, and Helen joining you, which all the
I
viewers will be going,
have
yay!
an easy answer. Bye,
What's that?
Paul.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing. So, okay, but thanks, Paige, friendly
miss you.
colleague. So yeah, but that's what to do, studio. Just shut me up. You know, it's the only way. Now, what's this one, Paige? What are we looking at here? So this is the Canary Wide Field Telescopes. This is Canary 2, and this looks like some
Cave Nebula.
nebulosity coming in.
It's the Cave Nebula.
Okay, oh, nice. Now, this one will probably look like a little ball of gas somewhere in the center of that, I would think. Right, I'm going to stay on. Helen is here. So I'll be here in the background, Paige. So if you hear these dulcet little ghoulish screams in the background, then it's me trying to point something out really cool in the telescopes, right? But I'll hand over to Helen now.
Okay. All right, so we are welcoming Helen Avery onto the show to talk to us about some mythology of these objects and how they get their spooky names. And so while we get started, let's just remind ourselves, because we're going to be talking about a lot of constellations. Oh, hi, Helen.
Hey,
Hi,
how
happy
you
Halloween.
doing? Happy
Hey, Helen.
Halloween.
Oh, Paul, I already forgot that you were on. So I was saying we're going to remind ourselves quickly what a constellation is, because Helen, I know you have a lot of fun things to talk about with constellations. So a constellation is a pattern of stars in the night sky, totally human created. So they're really awesome. The culture behind them is incredible. But when we're actually talking about the star's location, they're not next to each other in the way that you think. They just appear that way when we look up in the sky. One star could be here and the other could be all the way light years away. It's just that they're so distant from us, as it already is, that they look like they're next to each other. So these patterns are totally human made. Different cultures have seen them differently. There is some constellations that were recognized and no longer are. And actually, because all these stars are moving, the constellations will change. Our beloved Orion itself will change and will lose its shape in lots and lots of years. But all right, so let's get Helen chatting, because she's got a lot of really awesome stuff. How's it go, Helen?
It's pretty good. Yeah, how are you doing?
Good. Doing well. Doing better now
freaked
that
out
we
by
don't see
Paul's
Paul's
face.
scary mask face.
Yeah, right.
So right now, our telescopes are looking at the Cave Nebula. But I think that we want to transition into talking about some stars and some constellations, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of
What do you got for us?
monsters in the constellations. So yeah, it'd be cool to look at them.
Let's see. I'm not sure what's on the schedule at the moment.
Hey, Helen, we saw earlier, we saw Cetus A, which is this galaxy within the constellation of Cetus, and we showed that because this galaxy's got this supermassive black hole at the heart of it. We also have seen the Cetus bubble nebula, and we've also seen Algol. So those are two constellations there. And I know you were going to talk about Cetus, the sea monster, and then Perseus, which is where Algol was, I believe.
Yeah, so there are a few monsters up in the sky in the constellations, and Cetus is one of them, the sea monster. But we also have Hydra, like the water snake. We have Scorpius. There's serpents as well up there, and there's Draco. And one of the interesting things is that, and I want to check this with you guys, is that Hydra, Scorpius, and Cetus are in like the lower part of the sky. And apparently that was very deliberate when they were picked there, that these monsters were like in the deep, if you will, these watery monsters, or the scorpions, not particularly watery, I guess. But yeah, so but is that right? Have I got that right?
Yeah, it is. And that's with a big assumption that the people who were doing all of that, which is who the Greeks and Romans and people, they were in the northern hemisphere doing that.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it was their southern sky. So we see up in the northern hemisphere, Scorpius only just touches the southern hemisphere. But of course, you go down to the Chile Observatory, it's amazing. You see Scorpius almost going directly over the top of you. It's absolutely amazing to see.
Well, some people have said it was deliberate, that there was a reason. It was very well thought about when people named the constellations and chose, where they were in the sky. So it was kind of seen that the monsters were all, for the Greeks, this is, obviously not those in Chile, but for the Greeks, were at this bottom part of the sky. And Cetus was one of them. Yeah, I mean, I love the constellation because the story is just so rich when it comes to Cetus, and it's just, and I hate to regale the tale again and again, so I'll do it really quickly. But the whole, the Queen Cassiopeia, and is so vain that she sort of boasts that her and her daughter Andromeda are the most beautiful in the land, and it really upsets the sea nymphs, who go to Neptune and say, "Excuse me, or Poseidon with the Greeks, what's going on here?" Sort her out. So he causes all this flooding, and poor King Cepheus is like, "Oh my God, all my people are going to die." And this huge monster comes out, this kraken, which is Cetus, comes out of the water and terrorizes the people. And King Cepheus doesn't know what to do. And the oracle tells him, "You have to sacrifice Andromeda, your daughter, to Cetus, the kraken." So they tie old Andromeda to a rock. And just as she's about to be eaten, I always think of Clash of the Titans. I just love that movie. It just so happens old Perseus is flying by on Pegasus, some say, or he was on his own in his winged sandals, and he happened to be carrying the head of Medusa, the Gorgon, who he just lopped off her head. And he took a look down in the bay and thought, "Wow, I might as well save Andromeda." So he, depending on the story, shows the Kraken Medusa's head. And if you look into Medusa's eyes, you turn to stone, and the Kraken turns to stone. And I was reading earlier today about how a few people came out sort of earlier in history, hundreds of years ago, and said that they knew where the bones were buried of this particular Kraken. Some religious folks said that. So I was kind of surprised, and then I sort of got in my head about how did they get the bones out of the ocean and stuff like that. But yes, I think that's like the most fabulous story. But Cetus also means whale. Now, obviously, the Greeks didn't have whales in their part of the world, but you could imagine that maybe seafarers came back and said, we saw this huge thing, and it came out of the water and like a dragon, but it spurted like water out of its head and not fire, and it had these huge jaws, and it sort of got morphed into, wow, there's this like real monster of the deep that exists out there. So yeah, it's a great one, the monster of the deep, the sea monster, the Kraken.
There's a lot of constellations that are named after, like I'm thinking of like Hydra and Draco, and they all seem, I don't know, the chosen, I'm going to call it the chosen monster, I guess, all seems similar.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there's this story, they're all sort of serpent-esque,
Hmm.
which is really fascinating when you start to think about, the Bible as well. There's this sort of theme that runs throughout humanity, it seems, of like this serpent type monster. Because even the Kraken, actually, if you look at sort of depictions of it, it's kind of like a lizard, almost like a Godzilla type kind of dragony thing. Um, and what I love, what really I just love about the constellations is just the myths. I mean, there were like these stories that humans have told themselves throughout cultures, across like time, are are all the same theme. It's the same archetypes. So as you just sort of mentioned there, it was Hercules who slays Hydra as one of his labors. The same with Draco actually appears in one of Hercules' labors. Um, and then we have Scorpius is slightly different because Scorpius actually kills Orion by nipping his heels. But there is this tale throughout myth, and I say, and these are just Greek myths, but you can find these star myths in Native American star myths, Aboriginal star myths, like South Pacific star myths. They all seem to have, and maybe it's different constellations or different names, this idea of the hero or someone overcoming their fear to slay something angry and vicious and evil, malevolent, often at the end of it to gain something. So in the case of Hercules and Hydra, for example, of Hercules and Draco, he's going for the apple of immortality. So the slaying of this something angry and evil to win immortality. And in the case of trying to think, so Cetus, for example, Perseus slays Cetus and he wins something very pure and innocent, which is Andromeda. And sometimes they become kings afterwards, or they're put in the heavens. And so I just love that, like, part of our human, it just seems to be in our DNA, this constant story of the slaying of these the
Beasts.
angriness. Yeah, and then it's all, you add the layer of the sea to that, and it seems to me that there's this constant story of the subconscious, just going in deep and what's out, digging up whatever's there. But then I was trying to think about this because more recently, we're seeing a lot of movies of evil aliens out in space, because obviously now we can, we're going into space. People are starting their imagination. Maybe it used to be there's something in the depths of the ocean that's like a metaphor for something in the depths of us. Now we've sort of projected that outwards, that there's something in the unknown out there in the dark that's evil that we have to conquer. So I just love that it's all up there for us just to go and gaze at and say, we've been telling the same stories for thousands of years.
Hey, can I just point something out to you? What we're looking at the moment, it is related to the sea. This is a close-up now using the Canary 4 solar system telescope of that supernova remnant that we've been talking about tonight, the Crab nebulae. And look, you can see all these lovely tenuous streams of matter shooting off in this cataclysmic destruction of this large star. It's stunning. Paige, don't forget, we need to ask Helen about her experience of Halloween, All Hallows, maybe how Wiccan is celebrated over here in the UK.
Yes, we had a question on the discussion board. Someone was asking how it was celebrated in the UK, and Paul gave us an answer mostly about not wanting to give candy out to children. So we were really curious, Helen, how it's celebrated for you.
I feel just like I'm going to disappoint people, but it was a similar, Halloween just wasn't a big deal. And I've been in the States 12 years. So I've really adopted Halloween. And also over that time, I've kind of adopted Samhain, the Celtic pagan festival as well, which, marks the between of the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. So it's like it's an astronomical holiday. This.
Yes.
Now, I only found out about this at the weekend when I was doing some reading. I didn't realize that there was any actual astronomical relevance of All Hallows or Halloween.
Mhm.
And it's these quarters, isn't it? Where we're halfway between a solstice and an equinox. And I never realized that that is one of the things that All Hallows marks, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about any of the pagan and the Celtic festivals, they were all based on sort of seasons and weather patterns and growing and the cycle of our human daily life to help us sort of understand that, and then mixed in, of course, with like sort of worshipping and bringing in spirits and deities like that. So they were always bound to be connected to like the astronomical calendars in some way when you think about it. So yeah, this is an astronomical holiday. It's not about candy. It's about the sky and
Exactly.
stars.
We've got a graphic actually that will come up at some point, which is showing the four quarters. But I was just thinking there, Paige, that anybody kind of joining the show late is thinking that your voice has got mighty deep. There you go. There's that
Hilarious.
lovely diagram. So I'll let you take it from here. I'll shut up for a bit.
So yeah, so if you're just joining the show late, Paul is on audio only, so my voice has not changed that drastically, but we are looking at so how we get the equinoxes and solstice, the winter and summer. And so in between equinoxes and solstices, we have these quarters, which Helen can tell us a little bit more, if you will, about how All Hallows Eve came to be with the quarters, and are we actually even landing on the right day for the quarter?
I'm not sure the exact day, but it's always around sort of between the 30th and the 1st.
Okay.
30th of October and the 1st of November. Let me consult my witchy book. I have a nice little witchy calendar diary that keeps me. Yeah, no, I've got it down as tomorrow. Hallowmas is another word for it. So yeah, tomorrow.
Oh.
But then it may be that people today have just adopted October the 31st as like an easy day to remember rather than shifting around.
Yeah.
So it could be that.
Yeah, I think it was like the day was picked a while ago, and I'd have to look up the article. There was the culture that created it. It was the day that they set, but then like early November is when the actual quarter falls, and then I don't know. It was a bad story. The point is that I don't think it's exactly on the 31st, but because it's been tradition, it's been staying on it. But so this ecliptic that you're seeing in this graphic here is the path that the sun takes through our sky. So actually, this is a really cool graphic, and I'm going to go all science log for a second. I apologize. But when I said that the constellations look like they're laying in the same plane from Earth, even though it's not real, that's called the celestial sphere. So there's this imaginary sphere that envelopes Earth where we see things happening geocentrically, even though, as we know, if you were on the sun, you'd see things differently. It's because of where we orbit and etc. And so the ecliptic is the sun's path in our sky, and that's what creates these equinoxes and solstices and the quarters.
And of course, we know that those occur on slightly different days each year, or can do, which is why I guess the four quarters also have to change if it's the midpoint between a solstice and an equinox. But you were talking there about your witchy book there, Helen, and we were joking before about some of this stuff, but I bet you if I went down the road to Stonehenge tomorrow night, or to the Avery Stones, or any of the other local stone circles around me, there are going to be people in long black cloaks there. I mean, there is a new culture, isn't there, of people celebrating this. No, there is, celebrating this stuff.
I think they wear long black cloaks.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, that's the kind of Harry Potter kind of theme that's taken over, hasn't it? But there would be people down there celebrating Halloween. So what are they? Do you know what they're celebrating, and what kind of culture or faith or system they're actually celebrating when they go to those places on something like Halloween?
Oh, well, Halloween, it's, the veil is very thin, it's said on Halloween.
Mm.
So it's very beautiful. It's a day where you can make offerings to those who've departed.
Okay.
So it's kind of, a celebration of those who've left, and you can contact them if you wish. But it's more about sort of a celebration, and there are various sort of rituals around it, like burning bonfires, which
Mm.
we do in England on November the 5th for different reasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's like a celebration,
Yeah.
celebration of the spirits, and like offerings to the
Yeah.
spirits, those kinds of things. Safe winter, that kind of.
And
Yeah.
these ancient stone circles, I mean, you go there and you can't help but be affected by them. You feel something, you feel a reverence in exactly the same way. If you go to Avery's Stone Circle, you feel the same kind of reverence as you feel when you go into Canterbury Cathedral, or a place of worship like that, and there is, I'm not into the energy and crystals, but you do feel an energy when you're there, just on the experience of being around these incredibly ancient monuments. They're amazing. I mean, you
Well,
don't
they were
really, I
built
think they're,
on ley lines.
yeah,
That's why they were put there. I
yeah,
mean, every church you'll find was built above a well, or a sacred site. I mean, wherever you see a church, it will have been, someone will have gone there and divined, this is where this
yeah.
sacred site is. So if you feel that energy, it's because someone before you felt that energy, and that's why they put that there. And
Yeah.
in Ireland, a lot of the churches were built on top of pagan wells, because the well
Okay.
was put in where the sacred energy was felt. And then when the church came in, they just went, thank you very much. Boom. The
We'll
church
have
over.
that.
So, and you'll find a well
Just
in
to tell our viewers, we are looking at the all sky camera at the moment. We can see on the left there, we've got the constellation of Orion. We've got Canis Major, the bright star, right to the kind of 8 o'clock position. That's Canis Major and the dog star. So that's the hunter's dog, isn't it? That's Orion's dog, is it, Helen?
Yes. I think, there's an
Yep.
interesting thing about Orion, which I think, back to this idea of these monsters in the sky and this myth that we keep getting told, this story. It's just like, the way I like to think of it is just like, we're all consciousness. Everything is consciousness. And there's like a message coming through all the time. So you might not, just bear with me, Paul.
Okay. Okay.
So, but so for the Cassiopeia, I mean, it's such an obvious constellation, this sort of M that's around, the pole star. And she was placed up in the sky, as is the story we just talked about, because she was so vain and boastful. She was placed upside down on her head, sort of sat in a chair. That's what that constellation is. Orion was killed by the Scorpion because he was boastful. He was sort of said, well, I can kill any animal in the world. And I thought, well, can you, my friend? And the Scorpion killed him, and he was put up in the sky. And so, and Hercules, by the way, Hera duped him. He went insane. She made him go insane, and he killed his wife and children, and felt so guilty of the things he'd done, and that's why he had to go on these labors and kill Hydra and blah blah. There are these really big themes in all the stories that we look up in the sky that are, what's your pride? What's your arrogance? Like,
Yeah.
And and also Hercules was a bit of a dimwit. He wasn't very wise, so it was like, don't be a dimwit like Hercules. And also, overcome your guilt by having, doing something about it. If you've done, or there's no reason to be guilty. It was really the message. Like, he hadn't done anything wrong. And as humans, these are themes we always play out. Like, we have this sense of guilt a lot of the time, or we're boastful, or we think, in biblical terms, like our will versus God's will kind of thing. And these messages were constantly just up there. You're saying, you go to a sacred site and you feel the reverence. I find that when I look up into the night sky and contemplate those stories, that's what I feel, like the same reverence there. Like, there's just this message that you could call, energetic, but it's passing in a story.
Yeah. But I feel that just looking up at the night sky anyway, Helen, we've spoken about this before, I get lost in it. If I'm at the observatory, if I finish my work early, all I do is I sit on the bonnet of the car on my back and I just stare up and I get lost in the heavens. And I look
Yeah.
at stuff like this. This is from the Canary 3 Deep Sky Telescope. This is one of the things that we were talking about earlier, the Seven Sisters. And there's yet another story, another mythological story. All of those sisters being represented and named for those bright stars. It's these young, hot stars that Paige was telling us they're not going to last very long because they're large, they're young, and they're going to burn themselves out quickly. But my goodness, they're going to burn bright, over those few million years. And you can see all that background nebulosity. It's really cool, isn't it, Paige?
It is. It's, I love them. And you should take the picture. You should go on our cam where the show is happening and you can take pictures of all of these objects. Right now, the Seven Sisters and whatever other things. We have a lot of nebulae going on tonight. And I think we should wrap up, guys. What do you think? I think we should let our viewers go to bed and hopefully they don't have nightmares about the spooky things we talked about. But
Yeah,
Paul's got to go and
I'm,
get that makeup off as well.
I'm,
yeah,
I'm,
Paul's gonna be up all night trying to do that. Although maybe he should
I've,
leave it on.
I've, oh, okay, yeah, okay, understood. Message received, loud and clear. So,
We're just
listen,
kidding.
I have really, really enjoyed tonight. It's very rare, isn't it, that we get to see during a Slooh broadcast such a wide range of fabulous looking objects. We were fighting that full moon tonight, but my goodness, we've seen some really terrific sights. And Helen, I love listening to your knowledge of the mythology. It's that storytelling. It's that tradition, that ancient tradition of storytelling, and learning the constellations and those stories behind it was how I learned the night sky. It's still relevant, even for people who are interested in the science of astronomy.
Absolutely.
It's a
Sure.
very, very relevant way of learning the night sky. So I'd urge
Absolutely.
anybody to have a look at that. So,
Well,
I mean,
that's why the stories were made. So people,
Yeah.
the more juicy the story, the more likely you are to remember the constellation and therefore know your place in time and space.
and
As you're moving about
the
tonight.
IAU, the International Astronomical Union, they actually have. When I said earlier that there are some constellations that were or discovered or recognized, whatever word you want to use for finding the pattern, and that are no longer recognized, that's because the IAU has determined 88 constellations that astronomers use in science, in papers. We look at them too, and we use them for points of reference. They are very much part of the science behind it too. It's
yeah.
and that's like Helen said, that's how it got started. I mean, these people
Yeah.
that saw the patterns all these years ago, they were astronomers. They were our ancestors in astronomy.
Yeah.
Really cool. Yeah. All right. Let's wrap up on that emotional note.
That was a very spooky ending.
That's all for
Lovey-dovey.
tonight. So you can capture more images of some of the objects we've been talking about on slooh.com. You can write a post about your favorite space monster in our community perspective section. You can even keep chatting with us. You can ask questions on the discussion boards, especially in the thread from tonight, and we'll get back to you if you have any questions about some of these spooktastic objects. Paul really likes that word.
I do. I love it.
And on November 3rd, we'll have a full moon being highlighted through our telescopes. And then coming up in about the mid of the month on the 17th, we'll have the Leonids meteor shower. So we have some exciting things coming up.
Yep. And Paige, you are doing, aren't you, on the 26th of November? I think you're looking at the first quarter moon.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll have clear skies for that, because I did one on Saturday. We didn't have it for that.
Oh.
But Paige, I think you should close us out on the show, because you're on screen. So we were going to remind people, weren't we, of the inaugural writing contest is still on.
Yes,
if you want to
the
tell people
Fenimore
about
Cooper Prize for eclipse writing. We're still accepting submissions until the end of December to celebrate August transcontinental solar eclipse. It's open to original short stories, poetry, essays. There's more info on our website. We look forward to your submissions. And join us again soon so we can all look up at what's out there together. This has been another astronomical production from Slooh. Good night, and we hope you don't have any nightmares about these fantastic objects.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Good night.
everyone.